Combat must be practiced to truly master the canvas of war.
Are you sure about that?
Your target is this location's computer system. Find and access the terminals. We need to destroy the reactor. The reactor will have tight security. Watch out for enemy patrols.
Hey all, Siege here, and today I do believe I gotta ask the community a question to get some real feedback, because to me at least, although on the surface these things seem like a significant positive for the game, in the long run, I guess I'm just not so sure. I'm referring to two different concepts I see that are making Warframe less of an actual game and more of just like a big area with a bunch of stuff running around to shoot. First, I want to talk about centers around the new Warframe, Xaku. Now I have to admit, this particular Warframe has quickly become one of my favorites, allowing the frame to steal the weapons of all enemies within range, imbue those weapons and your own with additional damage, CC the shit out of everything close to you on the map, and if all that isn't enough, by shedding all of its parts, it inflicts additional void damage, but more importantly, it keeps all those other abilities frozen in time, allowing for additional duration. The frame is super fun, and I can't tell you how many times I literally laughed out loud watching how helpless everything in the room is against this particular Warframe. I used to get that same feeling utilizing Revenant's Mesmer skin, watching enemies essentially bow their heads in timeout while I did whatever I pleased during the mission. And if I wanted them to help me out, well, I would just grab a few and let the chaos begin, essentially turning a room of enemies into allies. Often I would just sit there amongst the crossfire, watching everything play out. And I think Xaku takes that same concept and pushes it maybe even further. Not only making most of the immediate enemies pretty useless without their guns, but furthermore, taking all of those guns and just dashing headfirst into a large group of enemies. Something I would rarely do with other frames. And I have to admit that's kind of when I noticed a bit of a flaw in this gameplay loop, and I haven't been able to unsee it since. Xaku, for all intents and purposes, makes the game as trivial as possible, especially at low levels. What I mean by that is, by using a combination of its abilities, the game kind of turns into a running simulator, as you don't even have to aim or shoot if you don't want to. And while in practice it is extremely satisfying, doesn't that kind of go against the concept of the quote-unquote game itself? Like, I know Warframe doesn't take tons of skill to play, I get that, but whereas Xaku is the most obvious offender of this particular thing, it's not the only Warframe who could just press a few buttons and clear the room. The difference here is that Xaku barely even requires any setup to be able to just skate through each mission, potentially without ever even firing a gun, even though guns are the things doing the majority of the damage. It's not even taking into consideration all of these guns auto-aim and rarely, if ever, miss. Like I said, I am in absolute love with the abilities, but doesn't it kind of detract from the actual game aspect of Warframe? And on top of all that, we now have the Helminth system. Again, great in theory, but I was always under the impression that the reason there are so many Warframes in the game was because they really aren't one size fits all. Every one has specific upsides and downsides, and that's kind of the game within the game, you know? Managing your weaknesses and pressing your strengths to get you through. The Helminth system makes that concept moot, doesn't it? I mean, every Warframe in the game has weaknesses, you know? Being able to take an ability from another Warframe, while definitely interesting, just seems to fly in the face of that particular aspect of gameplay. There's over 40 frames. Doesn't it make it so new frames will only be looked at for their abilities, and maybe only the ones that Helminth can transfer over? I mean, if you have a frame that can work in almost every situation with abilities cobbled together specifically for this ultimate build, a brand new frame introduced will most likely not garner the interest it did in the past unless it itself is incredibly overpowered. And insert Xaku. Although it's not going to be the one people use for everything, and it's not overpowered in every situation, especially in high-level content. I just can't think of a mission type where a frame that can steal all of the enemy's weapons and then take those weapons and shoot them without any input from me, also imbuing those weapons with additional damage. You get my point. Maybe I'm wrong here, and please, feel free to correct me, but I feel like the major pull of Warframe is the ability to main a particular Warframe, but at the same time have your backups ready for content your main may not be strong at. For me, that typically means Revenant for the vast majority of the game's challenges, just for when I'm screwing around. But for Spy or Rescues, my Loki comes out. For brand new content, I'm not so sure about, if I'm going to be able to handle it right away because I don't know what I'm getting myself into. My Invincible Rhino build will generally allow me to handle the situation no matter what's thrown at me. Long defenses, that's going to be Nidus or even Trinity. And until they fix how truly broken she is, my Sanctuary runs require a healthy dose of Saren. But she definitely struggles in other parts of the game. Lately, frames like Wukong and now Xaku make it so I want to use more frames when I play. To me at least, this is the main idea behind Warframe. Choosing characters based on their strengths to accommodate particular aspects of the game. If I'm being honest, I actually had always kind of assumed DE had frames in mind when they would develop content, Ones that would most likely deal with a new type of combat better than others, but offering the ability for creative players to make builds that could suit new content on their old frames as well. This to me is a nice balance because some people just want to play. So a basic build on a frame conducive to fresh content can work in the same manner a veteran who digs deep into their setup can offset certain negative aspects of new concepts and make it through as well. It just made sense for the flow of the game. But now, with Helminth giving players the option of removing a weak ability on a frame and replacing it with some other Warframe's powers, does this not detract from the individuality and usefulness of the base frames themselves? Doesn't this make bad frames even less likely to be used, as the majority of people are going to try to augment their favorite frames to make them better versus trying to make a bad frame decent? And if it is only decent, wouldn't you just revert back to your good frame? Now, obviously, this is only my personal opinion, and I'm curious to hear your take on all of it. Do you think that the game seems to be getting even easier than before, or are you enjoying that aspect? I don't think there's any wrong answers here. I'm just concerned that if the challenge of the game starts to diminish, there will be a significant number of players who leave just because they're bored. You can only play with your Helminth augmented Inaris for so long before it just gets to a point where you don't want to play anymore. And if new frames can't compete with these new amalgamations of the original frames, what good are they? And is it even worth it to try to create a new configuration of multiple frames if one that you've made already does the job in most, if not all, situations? Even if some people decide to see what other frames can do, there will still most assuredly be diminishing returns here because, like I said, if the one frame you grinded out to get the abilities you want on it works like you intended, why make another? I don't know. This is how I see it, but maybe some of you with more experience in the Helminth system can shed some light on nuances not everyone is aware of that help this particular situation out. My argument here is admittedly mostly speculative, but if you follow my logic, you can probably see how this could become a problem down the line. Just like the builds that we see for frames on YouTube, where particular builds are kind of the best in class to use, after a while there will most assuredly be a best in class Helminth frame, if there aren't already. I'm purposely trying not to see those, so I might come upon them on my own and enjoy the fun of doing so, but these will inevitably be agreed upon, and the frames that don't make the cut will fall into an even deeper irrelevance than they already are. Well, unless you just want to build them to feed Helminth for their abilities. And all I can say about that is, you monster. Now, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video today, and it got you thinking about this just a little bit. Bear in mind that even though I've noticed this, Xaku is still my current favorite Warframe. It's the set it and forget it frame, and it just makes missions so damn stress-free. Simultaneously, the frame's greatest strength and, unfortunately, at least in my opinion, its greatest weakness, at least from a gameplay standpoint. But what do you think? I'll be interested to read the comments on this one. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today. Wonderful rest of your week. I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.